gonna get the recording going, and I imagine some of you may be trying to get to the theater tonight to see the show, so we're gonna try and be prompt and get things going. I'm not doing the talk, so there's a very good chance that everything will happen on time. So I'm going to get us going and say welcome. We are so glad that you've joined us again for this virtual version of our behind the scenes series. We are, as Mo's going to talk about in just a moment, we are in the middle of trying to work out all the details of being back in person starting in the fall, and all of our productions being in person. And it's a strange thing to go back to doing what we've been doing because it seems so far away, but we're looking forward to it, and we're very much looking forward to having you all in the room with us again in the very near future. As always, I want to take just a moment to say thank you to the sponsors of the Bravo Club Behind the Scenes series, Bob and Louise Salmons. They are not able to be with us here tonight, but I always like us to give a virtual round of applause for Bob and Louise and say thank you to them. I also want to take just a moment and point out that we have a couple of our Bravo scholars with us. I see Kira over there. Hi, Kira. And these, of course, are the students that your generosity helps to support while they are here this year. And the reason more of them aren't with us tonight is because they're either in the show or backstage or front of house or ushering, or and so we're lucky to have Kira here tonight to represent that bunch. And of course, thank you to all of you for the support that you give of these wonderful students. I also want to take just a moment to thank our season sponsors, of course, Chevron and Enstrom's, and our dear friends Chuck and Robbie Bro. If we can give them a virtual hand clap for supporting the arts during this tumultuous year. And one last thing I'm going to talk about before I hand it over to Mo is that, as you may know, every year in April, the beginning of April, we at CMU celebrate the Day of Giving on our birthday. I believe this year is our 94th birthday. And all of the departments come forward with a project. In the past, we've had sound equipment and lighting equipment that we've rallied for. This year, we are fundraising for a very good cause that is dear to my heart, and I know dear to many of your hearts as well. And that is, of course, the Landon Jones Memorial Scholarship. For those of you who knew Landon or didn't know Landon, Landon was a graduate of this program, I believe in 2002. A wonderfully talented young man, and January of 2019, he was tragically killed while on the side of the road helping a stranded motorist. And he was much beloved by our audiences and our alumni and people who've been involved with this theater, but involved with many theaters and performances across the country. And so we have named the Cabaret series after Landon, and are steadily raising money to reach our $25,000 starter amount to have an endowed scholarship. This will be the first named scholarship for music theater majors. And so we're very excited about that. So keep your eye out for that. That'll be going out, and we'll have a fun video with some of our alumni helping out as we try and not only raise money, but win, because it's all about winning, right? Anyway, and of course, Mo's going to talk about the Cabaret series next year. But in the meantime, I'm going to get out of the way and say thank you again for you being with us, and pass it on to Mo. Take it away, Mo.
The first thing is always to unmute yourself, which I have now done. So welcome, it's great to see everybody. And great to see faculty here and some of our Bravo scholars and all of you that are Bravo sponsors. We really appreciate all of you. Yeah, so I just wanted to quickly, before we get to Jess and her talk, which I know will be wonderful because I've heard her speak about Cabaret fairly extensively already, and she's so smart about it all, and has really great insights into the value of the show, just in general, but I think also how it speaks to today's time. But of course, we're not, we still have a couple of shows going on coming up just in a couple of What is that? I guess that's 3 weeks or something, 4 weeks. Miss Holmes we are doing, and we are doing it as a live radio play, which means that all of the sound effects will be foleyed with a Foley artist. Jess has experience with this because Jess was a Foley artist in a show that I directed a number of years ago. And it was so much fun. The audiences just loved. It really springs the imagination in a unique theatrical way to have a Foley artist. And so that is opening on April 8th and closes on that Saturday, the 10th. So there's 4 times to see that live. And then we are streaming it, which that process will begin on April 14th, and it'll just play through April 22nd. So I think it'll be fun to see and then listen to Miss Holmes when that comes out. And then a couple of weeks after that, we have our spring dance concert, Shifting Focus, and that's aptly named, I think, for where we are right now, which it feels like we're starting to see the light come out in terms of maybe getting through this pandemic. So I'm really excited to see what happens there. That concert is April 23rd and 24th. And then I guess I just want to tell you about a couple of other things that are happening. We're with this Jones Cabaret series that Jeremy mentioned, and maybe he can talk a little bit more about some of the special things we have planned. But one of the things I just discovered just recently is that Beth Malone, who we've been trying to get out here for a while now, is going to do a holiday cabaret as part of that concert series, on the kind of honing in on Christmas, New Year's. And so we're very excited about that because Beth Malone, if you don't know about her, she's a Tony-nominated actress for Fun Home. I saw her in Molly Brown when she did that at the Denver Center, and then she was all slated to play that at the Lincoln Center, and then it got canceled right before that all happened. So she's an extraordinary performer, and we're really excited to bring her to CMU. She's done some workshops for our students, and she's really extraordinary. So Jeremy, can I flip it back to you real quick and just, is there anything else you want to say about the Jones Cabaret series?
I'm gonna play my cards a little closer to my chest tonight.
Okay, that sounds great.
Until I've got everything solidified, but just know we've got some really exciting things coming up for you.
I can't believe what we're putting together. And I'm also very excited about our season, which we know most of what we're doing, and we're going to hold our cards too close to the vest too, because we are not quite ready with the final pick. And so we're going to announce that, we believe, at the Miss Holmes Bravo Club event, which will happen on April 10th. So you're going to have to come back and Zoom on in. And hopefully next year when we're doing this, nobody will be Zooming, and we'll be drinking a glass of wine together. So I want to now turn it back to Jess Jackson, who is a very dear friend and has been teaching here as a visiting professor now for kind of off and on for the last year and a half, 2 years. And she's been delightful to have here. She was going to direct The Wolves last spring, and then unfortunately that got canceled. And then as the pandemic was kind of raging over the holidays, I was afraid a similar fate was in store for us for Cabaret. Fortunately, that didn't happen. And so you're going to get to see a really wonderful production of it that a lot of the faculty here was involved in designing and putting together, and I'll let Jess speak to that. But Jess was my predecessor down at the Creed Repertory Theater, and she was the artistic director, and really did a fantastic job growing that organization. And so we're really delighted to have her here now. And so take it away, Jessica Jackson.
Hi, everybody. I am so thrilled to get to speak about a show I directed at a Bravo club because, like Mo said, I was beginning to think that I was like cursed in some way because the Wolves last semester, at around this time, we were learning that that show was probably going to be canceled due to COVID. And we had just finished staging the entire show and we were so excited about it. But so I'm so glad that Cabaret gets to see the light of day. And so yeah, I hope you all enjoy it as much as I enjoyed working on it. So this season that Cabaret was in, I remember being at the Bravo Club for Fiddler, and Jeremy read Naked Mole Rat, which I absolutely loved that moment. And Mo announced the season, and it was so thrilling and exciting. And of course, all those plays were chosen before, we knew the environment in which we'd be doing theater. But I'm really glad that we stuck with it, and that CMU was so supportive of finding a way to do live performance in a safe way. Because a lot of theater departments aren't as fortunate out there as we have been. So once we started beginning the process for Cabaret, the first question on all of our minds, on our creative team, was how do we do this show safely? And I was sometime in, I don't know, October or November of last year, and I was I was thinking, oh, it was September. It was September of, he remembers dates, I don't. And I remembered a production I saw in the late 90s when I was an undergraduate. It was directed by a pretty famous director named Robert Wilson, a pretty edgy director at American Repertory Theater. And it was in the Jungle of Cities. And he had created this stagescape created by scaffolding that created the feeling of tenements or dwellings piled on top of each other. And I think it was like a 3-story structure of scaffolding. And that show just stuck with me so many years later. And I started to think, okay, what if we thought about Cabaret that way? What if there was some sort of structure where we could have the actors isolated in a way, each in their own little rooms, and still be able to tell the story in some way? And so I think for me, it really, the inspiration for how do we even tell this story during this time was that moment.
Well, it also came from like us when we were talking just at night about the show, and COVID is happening, and our thoughts were like, well, I'll just stick the actors in a box. Just stick them in a box. They can't get any COVID on anybody.
Yeah, let's protect them. Let's put them in glass boxes. And it was halfway us joking,
but then we realized it could be real.
Yeah, then we realized it could be real because Robert Wilson did it long before COVID, and it was a beautiful show. And so, yeah, I think it sort of started there. And then, okay, so once we had that and we kind of started thinking about that and how do we make that safe? What are the rules around it in terms of safety? And we felt that was pretty good. Another line of thinking I was having and talking with people about at the same time was, okay, so now we go to the place where we usually go to first for when we're talking about an environment for a show, which is why put it in this environment? Why tell this story this way? And the thing I liked about it, the more I kind of looked at it in my mind, was there's this thing going on in Cabaret, which is it's a very insidious thing, because our protagonist, a young American writer named Cliff Bradshaw, and he's the Christopher Isherwood character in this play. He walks into 1931 Berlin, and it's a very specific moment in history. There's this Germany has been through a lot of sort of national trauma lately, and there's just a whole uh, a whole buffet of extremist political parties that people in Germany at this time are being attracted to on one way end of the spectrum or the other. And one of these parties is the Nazi Party. And they're in the last 2 years of their rise before they managed to get enough votes to take over the Reichstag and take control of Germany in 1933. And so there's this sense throughout the entire play that we're in Weimar, Berlin, and this wonderful party is happening. Cliff likens it to children getting wild and playing in their home, and they're playing in their room all the time, all the while wondering when their parents are going to come home. And so we have the decadent, transgressive, highly sexualized cabaret scene going on. All the while, there's this creeping rise and of this ever more popular fascist political party. And so by putting them in boxes, there was something interesting to me about how when this is happening in Berlin at the time, many of our characters have blinders on in a way. They can't, I think it's hard to see when you're a part of it. One of the most lovely and lovable characters in the show is Herr Schultz, and he is a Jewish fruit shop owner, and he says governments come and governments go. One won't be any different from the next, and he says, but it will be okay because I know Germans because I am German. Um, and and we hear him speaking those lines, and our audience, as audience members, we have this terrible dramatic irony hanging over us because we're the only ones who know how this story ends and the horrors that are in store for many of the characters. So yeah, there's this sense that the world will be okay if we can just party through it in a way in this world. And I liked the boxes for that. That was something interesting. So once we knew kind of that these boxes were blinders or having your head in the sand or escapism, being blind to this creeping rise of fascism around you, then the next question about these boxes were, okay, like how are we going to tell this story and how are we going to make it interesting and theatrical and exciting and add spectacle to it? Because those are all the things we want from cabaret. And so I started talking to Amanda, our wonderful choreographer, and I was like, what if they can all like climb on the inside of the boxes and hang from them and do crazy things inside the boxes? And she was like, yeah, totally. Yeah, she liked that idea. And so you'll see that these boxes are highly structural and they can hang and climb and use these walls in really amazing ways. Of course, then also I had the question for myself, okay, a character gets beat up. How does this fight scene work? How do you throw a punch when you can't get anywhere near each other? And so we solved that too with some interesting fight choreography by Ben Riegel. And of course, the hardest thing to figure out in a way was kissing. How do you kiss? How do you show intimacy when you're each in your own boxes? And for those of you who get to see this show, you'll see how I think we came up with something that expressed the sensuality of kissing and in using these walls and these adjoining boxes in ways to do that. So we've had to do some really creative storytelling, which was really just the most fun part of the process. Was these students, to their credit, were so willing to just experiment. And I would say, all right, you have to hand her a bag of oranges. And that bag of oranges has to get from this box to this box without anybody touching or leaving their boxes. And we experimented for a long time, and we kept talking about it, kissing, handing props, handing money to each other. All of these things had to be solved. And what's so great about the students is they just came in with tons of ideas, and we experimented with all of them. And when we found something we worked, we'd we'd say that's our convention, and we'd call it the convention, and we'd go forth and apply it to other things.
Sorry, from a design standpoint, in watching it the first time, where I saw all of these conventions come to life, I think the thing that I enjoyed about them is that there isn't one way of doing it. She has multiple ways of doing it, and all of them are equally as effective in conveying the story and furthering the storytelling. It's just really fun to kind of see that.
Yeah, it was fun to really to come up with all of these ways of telling the story with the students, and yeah, and collaborating with the designers. So yeah, and so I just sort of wanted to touch on just what an interesting process this has been. It's been so incredibly collaborative, and that's wonderful. And I think I'm gonna use this as an opportunity to pass it off to our scenic and lighting designer, Matt Schleif, to show you some pictures and talk about kind of how he got to the way, once we knew we wanted boxes, how he got to the boxes we have, and all the cool things he decided to do with them.
Hey guys, so oddly on the Zoom meetings, but also in the past when I've talked to Bravo Club, I usually have some 3D CAD computer aided drafting thing that I kind of like to show. But I'm not as interested in that for this because it doesn't help with the storytelling. And I think that the idea of how we think of boxes is a little bit more fun to imagine. And then also to, when you go see the show, to just all of a sudden see how we did it, which I think is a lot of fun. But I will share with you some inspirational pics. And so I'm just going to share my screen. And I always do this in the most boring way. And here we almost. And here we go. So one of there's something really quite beautiful about this particular image. And the idea that each box, each little environment that we exist in is fully fleshed out and yet microscopic and macro at the same time. It's taking this macro view of our world and putting it into this sort of microscopic world. And the other thing about it too is that it's quite confining, and yet at the same time, a person or a character that exists inside of this particular box wouldn't think it was confining. It would actually be the appropriate thing for where they are. And so there was something really kind of wonderful about creating a bunch of individual boxes that, and I'll speak to the lighting in just a moment, that when lit, we can put other boxes together and then form a larger view of a particular thing. So this was certainly something that was important. I also love printer's block trays. I actually used to have a bunch of them in my house way back when, and I would display little tchotchkes because they're like the perfect thing to hang on the wall and show all of your little knickknacks and baubles and stuff. But what I love about it is the way in which they stack, and they do essentially what this previous picture did, which is they create these very small areas that are specific for specific people and specific things. Oh, wow, that one, I'm just gonna skip right past it because it's so itty bitty. And then of course I look into architecture and I start looking at how, what's something that can be a box that's not exactly a box? You know, is it a rectangular prism? Is it an elongated rectangle? Is it a rectangle that's almost exactly like a box? But anyway, and I just sort of obsess with geometric things. In this particular picture, I also like the way they kind of push in and out, bringing certain ones forward and not. This image is also a similar kind of image with individual boxes that are all symmetrical. And then the last two pictures, this sort of has that printer's block tray that I was kind of looking at as a background. And this particular picture and the next one, which is this, ended up becoming quite inspirational for me in not only how I want the boxes to feel the essence and the scale of a person inside of the box contained, but also the lighting that we can utilize in each of these to tell a bigger story. And I'm going to stop sharing right there. And so taking all of this into account, we put these actors in these boxes, and from a lighting standpoint, it became I needed to talk about the scenery first to get into the lighting. The lighting became something that has, and in hindsight, I think will be a lighting design that I will never forget. It is not something. We're used to these big open spaces. We're used to trying to fill all of these sort of these ellipses of light that we put down onto the floor. And it's not often where every single light's structure and placement and how I shutter the light to fit just this box. It's not often that we get to do that for an entire show. And it created this opportunity of isolation, of featuring somebody the way that we use a follow spot on the lead singer in a number, while the dancers kind of around the lead person would be saturated in color. Because we don't have this open stage or this open format to do that, but we're isolated in boxes. I grouped dancers, I grouped certain characters by making the light in their box the same as this box, but then separating the lead singer or the soloist in this particular number. And so you get to see this very precise, high movement lighting design that, again, I'm super kind of proud of. I don't normally like to say that.
He doesn't. And I like that you used high movement, because that's what it feels like. It feels like we are never still. These lights are moving and also telling our story, the kind of more frenetic, action-driven part of our story, which is really cool.
And also just with our newer technology, thank you to the people that were able to give us that last year. We have these new LED lights that offer a lot of opportunities for really great lighting. But inside of this new technology lighting world, I still wanted to have that essence of 1931. So each box contains its own, what I call a practical light. It's an individual little bulb that looks like an incandescent carbon filament bulb. And so each box has its own incandescent light. It has its own front light. It has its own top light. And so I'm creating these little miniature worlds. And then one final thing to the lighting that I really enjoy is when we go into places like Cliff's room at the boarding house, other people show up in the room. And I think between just choosing which box they come into, but also then me doing the same lighting, it feels like they are really in the same room. You can look at the stage and you can see 3 different boxes, all for 3 different characters. And those people feel like they're in one room, while all the other boxes that have people in them are lit differently. And so it's very easy to tell, and it makes the storytelling a lot easier.
That was an illusion we really tried to push forward with the acting too. When you watch the show, you'll notice that the actors are speaking straight out toward the audience, but they're changing focal points to speak to different characters, and they're staying consistent with those things. And we really worked on, the timing of making it very believable that, even though a character can't really see their scene partner, that they still do see when their scene partner, when their scene partner's face falls, or when their scene partner gets excited, and then they can adjust what they're doing to do that. And so it took a lot of coordination.
Yeah, and the timing of it, I remember going to the first design, what we call designer runs, where designers show up and watch the work that's been happening in rehearsal. And I remember going to the first designer run thinking, wow, their timing is really good, because they can't see each other. there's a wall between them and the actor that they are with. And it was really kind of wonderful, and also especially with the choreography, with what Amanda created. They turn to face the wall at the same time and turn and walk away from two walls at exactly the same time, and I was like, wow, this is gonna be super cool.
Yeah.
So
How are we doing on time, Jeremy? Are we talking too much? We're okay? Well, I do want to also shout out what's interesting too is there were two parts of the design, two design aspects that got to be a little more traditional and really, really carry a lot of weight in this production. And one is Jill's costumes, because I could see Jill's beautiful costumes for this production working for a traditionally staged production of Cabaret. And that's exactly what we needed. We needed, because we're doing so much with just these boxes and light, that we also needed to flavor this world, for you to look at these characters and know that they are in Weimar, Berlin, and so that was a really important thing for us, is what she did with those costumes. And of course, one of our students, Jose Prado, is our sound designer, and he was able to give us some soundscapes that also kind of help get us there as well. Does anybody, sorry, our dog does not like it when we're on Zoom, so this is just something we're gonna have to let her in. Does anybody have any questions? Or want to add anything? Well, there is one funny story.
I have a question.
Oh yes, go on.
And it's a silly, I mean, it's a question that would come from someone with no theater background. You're so proud of this set. Is it in that world, do you ever reuse a set, or is every show have its own thing? I mean, this seems like something you could do other things with, especially given the whole modularity and lighting and things.
I will speak to that specifically. There is a bad video that I made for CMU Theater with Bree, where we go around and talk about sustainability and what we're doing in our theaters. And it's silly, don't get me wrong. It's not like it's a serious video. To answer that question, I personally, as a designer, really don't like reusing things. I like every show to feel as custom as the show is. I want it always to be something that people haven't seen before. Obviously, some plays don't allow for that. But as far as reusing the scenery, we certainly take all of our materials and we break them down and we reuse them regularly. So a vast majority, not a majority, a good portion of the steel that we used in this show will be used in Miss Holmes to build our platforms. We've pushed into becoming a metal shop, which is really quite wonderful, structurally and financially. So yeah, we do reuse certain things. Specifically with this show, there is something that I am going to be a project that I'm working on with Amanda Benson, where we specifically will be reusing the 4-foot boxes, and maybe not the other ones, but that is for another time and place.
Yep. It just seemed to me like such a good idea that you could have like a whole genre called like tiny box theater.
I keep thinking one of my fun, just things that's fun to talk about during tech is what other shows could we do with this? Was just sort of, we were making up all sorts of shows we could do it in. It's lots of fun. But yeah, the steel that it's made of will certainly see the light of day again. Cool. Jill, do you have something? Do you want to say? No.
Oh, okay.
She already did a whole costume thing
bad.
too at Jeremy's what was it, a history talk? Show history talk.
Show history and talking about the art and costuming that led from the Weimar Republic. That was for New Dimensions.
Nice. Yeah, so evocative. Yeah, anybody else have any other questions or anything? Cool. Well, yeah, I wish that I had done this one thing when we were first started talking about this show in September, because it would be the perfect thing to screen share and show you at this time. But when Matt and I were trying to understand whether or not anybody could even tell a story or dance or do anything in a 4-foot by 5-foot box, we have our front door has this odd architectural thing where it's basically the little entryway is basically a 4-foot box. And one night Matt got up and started dancing in it.
I was
And
like, look, we can do so many things.
And I wish there was just, and he was going for it, and very Fosse. And I was kind of, I just sort of kicked myself that I didn't pull out my phone and get a good video of it, just because I could be like, see, this is how this all started. And it would have been amusing too. It was great. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the show. I hope many of you get to see it. I know it's hard to know if it's the right thing to do to get out there, but we're really, doing our best to socially distance everybody, and our audience stays masked. And so I feel pretty confident about what the university and the department are doing on those fronts. So thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Wonderful. And Matt, thank you. Just to wrap us up, I want to thank the entire team. Jessica, of course, as our guest and wonderful director, Matt as the lighting designer and set designer, Amanda Benson as the choreographer of all this work, wonderful work, and Jill as the costume designer. It's a beautiful and compelling show. I hope you'll make it out to see it before we close next Saturday night. With that, I'm going to say farewell. And for those of you who may be trying to get to the show, I told you we'd get done quickly, and you'd have plenty of time. So now you do. Thank you again for your constant support, and we look forward to seeing you on April the 10th for Miss Holmes. Thank you, and have a great March. Bye-bye, everybody.